We welcome you to joining Hard Lens Media. So thank you for joining our audience, to our listeners, and to our live stream audience. Let me just
Well, thanks, fellas, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here this weekend.
Yes, can you please introduce yourself and tell us why you're challenging Cook County Assessor Joseph Barrios this election cycle?
My name is Fritz Kaegi. I'm from Oak Park, Illinois. I live there with my wife and 3 kids. I originally grew up in Hyde Park. I'm running for Cook County Assessor to make this office ethical, transparent, and fair. It's very important economically. It determines each person's share of the property tax bill that is given to them by all the different taxing bodies in Cook County. It's supposed to be done based on the value of your home or your property, but it's not being done that way. It's generating incredible equality. It is that way because of a very troubling pattern of pay-to-play and corruption. And we can make this office work much better because this is an executive office that has the authority to change the way it works. We can make it ethical, transparent, and fair without needing any new laws. And that would generate a great economic benefit, advance social justice, improve our governing authority out here, and good government for 5.2 million people. So it's very important. I'm very excited to be doing this.
Now, there's a long history of Cook County politics, the Democratic machine politics here.
Yes.
And you're making a promise of never taking campaign contributions from any property tax lawyers doing business with the assessor's office.
That's correct.
What has been your campaign's challenge with getting your message out? What grassroots organizations have thrown their support behind you? And what is your answer to critics who say that you can't beat an establishment candidate?
What I'd say is that the current machine and old guard, they're content with Joe Barrios, the chairman of the party, but the voters are completely done with the pay-to-play and the corruption and the unfairness of Joe Barrios, the assessor. We see this across the county, and getting our message out, people are ready for a change. We see all over the county the fact that people are highly aware of these issues, the fact that corruption, inequality, and property taxes are all rolled up in a bill that they get every year, and it's been very well reported in the media over time, shows that people are ready and activated for a change. The county is huge, so we're trying to tell people about there's a great alternative here. People want someone who's been a financial specialist, a professional, someone who won't inject politics into this important technical process, someone who wants to be transparent, someone who's not bringing a political agenda or a conflict of interest or taking money from folks who do work before the office. People really like that and are embracing it when they meet us and hear about us. So the key is just to get out there. Now, we've just had a wonderful couple of weeks in terms of endorsements. We were just endorsed by Our Revolution, which is the organizational successor to Bernie Sanders' campaign. It is the largest grassroots organization in the whole state.
Well, congratulations for getting that support.
Well, thanks. And we were their very first candidate to be endorsed, and it's a true pleasure. And we're getting support from people who stand for progressive politics in this county, like David Orr, Chuy Garcia, Heather Staines, and more are coming.
All right. Now, you've mentioned your past experience, and your campaign website states that you've worked at Columbia Wagner Asset Management.
Wanger
Asset Management for 13 years as an investment analyst, Morningstar, UBS Equity Research, and you've also worked for a Charter Financial Analyst designation. So you are also part of Social Venture Partners in Chicago, which provides the financial backing and capacity building resources for its partners to nonprofits fighting poverty. So how have these previous experiences shaped you, and how will they help you should you be elected?
I'm glad you asked that. My career has been about valuing assets and about stewardship. I think these are qualities that people want out of this office. So I got an MBA from Stanford in 2001. I am a chartered financial analyst, which is a very rigorous process to learn on how to value things. I've become a certified Illinois assessment officer, which assessors all throughout the state are required to have, except as it happens in Cook County, where no qualifications are required whatsoever. But going through that process was really good because I learned about the professionalism that resides in this profession. And people want someone with experience valuing assets and stewardship. So I've been doing this for over 20 years. My company, Columbia Langer Asset Management, is a widely respected company that invests the money of average people saving through retirement in college through a vehicle called a mutual fund, which is a very standard vehicle you'd have in your 401k plan if you have access to one at work. Our fund has been around since 1970. The Acorn Fund is very widely respected as a long-term investor. I had to step down from that role to run for this race, but I'm very proud of my experience.
So most people with that kind of a background don't just turn out of bed one day and I'm going to go take on one of the most powerful politicians in the state. What got you from that point? Because it's a very nice life that you have. You have that set up. What made you now want to go? Okay, now I'm going to put myself through this process.
Sure. Well, I've been involved in progressive Democratic politics for quite a while now. I was a canvasser for the Illinois Public Action Council in the late 80s. I've been involved in supporting young Democrats running for Congress in the Chicago area for over a decade. I've been out there door knocking, volunteering, hosting, going back to Dean's campaign in Iowa and the Iowa caucus. But you do that, and it's satisfying, and you feel like you're doing something. But Congressman Danny Davis makes this distinction between, are you a person that is shaping things or is being shaped? And I was in a very interesting job that I loved with people that I love. I want to have a bigger impact, and I saw how important this office is, and saw that what my experience is in terms of the experience valuing assets, the experience of being a steward, not injecting politics into this process, and that's what people wanted, and there being a great need for it. It's an executive office where you could have a really big impact. It really excited me, and I've only been confirmed in that since we started running in May.
Now, on your campaign website, you address nepotism in Cook County, and its quote is stated as such: under the current administration, the Cook County Assessor's Office has been synonymous with pay-to-play, corruption, and old-school nepotism. It's a sad history here in Illinois, across our entire state. And it's cost regular taxpayers dearly. And that will end when you, Fritz Kaegi, will be elected. Fritz will bring fairness, transparency, and the highest ethical standards to the assessor's office while ensuring that the staff reflect diversity of the county itself. What will be your reformist policies, and how will you break the system of corruption that is affecting Cook County?
Sure. So we're going to make the office ethical, transparent, and fair, first by not taking donations from lawyers that work before the office. Today, one of the main reasons why we have such an imbalanced, unfair system is that lawyers that practice before the office seeking reduction in assessments largely deliver those benefits to downtown skyscraper owners. Mm-hmm. That causes properties like Trump Tower, Willis Tower to be massively under-assessed. And guess who makes up the difference? Everyone else does in the county, especially folks who are the most disadvantaged, who are not participating in the appeals process, who are hit by the housing crisis. So that's one. We're going to eliminate the pay-to-play. We're committed to extirpating political influence from the process of valuation by eliminating the influence of those firms. Two, we're going to make things transparent by telling people how their assessments are calculated. Right now, our assessor will not even reveal where they're getting their numbers from. There's no accountability for the work that they do there, even though this is determining everyone's share of the property tax bills. So we're committed to opening up the data, telling people how their assessments are calculated, opening up the algorithms so third parties can look at it and hold this office accountable. We'll show our work just like you do in school, and we don't need a new law to do that. That is something that the assessor has the authority to do. Third most important thing we're going to do, we're going to run the better model that's available that will generate more uniform rates. Right now, millions of people in the county are paying rates much higher than they ought to be. The Tribune showed with great exhaustive detail last summer in their expose that the neighborhoods that are the poorest in Cook County are paying the highest rates. The ones that were most hit by the housing crisis are paying the highest rates. And the more modest your home in any neighborhood, the higher the rate you pay. That's ridiculous. And so if we run this more uniform model that the office owns, we can solve that. We can largely solve that problem. They already own this model. It was funded by the MacArthur Foundation, developed by experts in the industry at the University of Chicago. They told us they were implementing this. And only when that expose came out by the Tribune did we find out that they were lying, and they were not, and it's only gotten worse since then. So we're committed to implementing it and improving it. That will solve the regressivity problem, or go a great length to solving it, and we can do that also without needing any new law. It just requires new leadership and the courage to implement this.
So we've covered events that have gone over that exact issue. That I think the numbers they had was if you have $1 million house and a $100,000 house are the numbers that they were using. That everything is done completely opaque. You can't see any transparency of how taxes are put in. One thing that I asked and got kind of a different answer when we were over there. Want to run by you. So we know the residential rates are completely obfuscated and they're not accurate to what they should be, and certain groups are paying more than others. But I've also heard that there's much more money in the commercial real estate, and that hasn't even been really looked into with any assessment or anything. Do you have any comments on that?
You bet. I mean, the residential, one of the greatest stories here is of overassessment. The story in commercial is the really outrageous underassessment that we find. So, commercial share of total property taxes paid in Cook County has been declining for a long time. It's at its lowest share in a very long time, even as commercial valuations downtown have zoomed upwards with lowering interest rates. Institutional investors around the world, if bonds are paying 2%, they want to own real estate that yields 5%. That's what you get with downtown commercial properties. And we find that, I'll give you a couple of examples. Trump Tower, its bottom third, was marked down 70% in the appeals process to just $4 million on the logic that it is substandard property. This is the most valuable land in the whole city, and it saved Trump millions of dollars per year because he hired a connected lawyer to do it. Willis Tower, former Sears Tower, was purchased by Blackstone, which is a very considerable, one of the largest private equity investors in the world, one of the biggest real estate investors in the world. They purchased Willis Tower for more than $1 billion. Its mortgage is more than $1 billion, which means the bankers who lent them the money to buy it, they think it's worth more than $1 billion. It's assessed at just half that. And that means that everyone else in the county has to make up for it. And we find so many examples like this downtown. There's going to be more research coming out on this. It will demonstrate that is the most outrageous aspect of underassessment. And as you mentioned, there is this connection with the pay-to-play again, because most of the contributions that go to our current assessor's campaign come from lawyers that practice before the office seeking reductions in assessments. Most of the assessment reductions that they get are on these commercial properties.
Yeah. So I want to add just one clarification for people that it's a very complex system that we've been working with for a while, that we're still learning about ourselves. But can you explain to people why making the Willis Tower still the Sears Tower doll through Chicagoans, but how the Sears Tower being valued at half as much makes everyone else pay more?
Sure. So we have many different taxing bodies in Cook County. They all come up with a budget, and it results in a levy. So it goes from the city and the county and all the different school districts all the way down to the little library boards and mosquito abatement districts. That results in $14 billion of property taxes that are collected in Cook County every year. It goes up a little bit every year. The assessor's office determines how that bill is distributed amongst each property owner in the county. And how it's deciding how that's distributed is based on your assessment. And so if they're under-assessing you, someone else has to make up the rest of that bill if they're reducing your contribution. So what we find is that they're making huge breaks for Trump Tower, Willis Tower, who are not even owned by people, they're owned by corporations. And it gets pushed on to millions of people who work in the rest of the county, and it results in them being displaced, businesses disinvesting in their neighborhoods, and for the people who are left behind, it's money out of their pockets that they could be spending doing other things. And it's made even worse by the fact that to get a measure of justice, you have to go out and hire lawyers that are the folks who are supposed to have the inside track to getting a reduction to get you a measure of justice. I think the way You judge how this office is doing, is how are you doing for the folks who don't appeal?
Now, in regards to this, we've seen like large real estate developers move into communities like Pilsen, Northwest Side, South Austin, and there have been many activists and grassroots organizations in those communities that are trying to stop the displacement of people. When we covered the Pilsen Alliance, we've covered a few of their press conferences. They have mentioned that since gentrification and large real estate developers have been moving in, around 10,000 people have been displaced. A lot of cultural and community locations have been shut down or been torn down. And at the same time, there's a huge increase in rent and home properties. So if you are elected, what will be your policy in regards to dealing with these large real estate developers moving into these low-income minority communities? And what will be your plan to really bring some relief to the working-class families?
Yeah, so there are two things that we can do, two different categories of what we can do. There's the things that the assessor's office has the authority to do without needing new laws, and then there are the things that will require a legal remedy, but the assessor can advocate for. So in terms of what the assessor can do on its own, right now it's spending so much time and resources on the appeals process, which only benefits the most proximate to power, the people who are the most on the inside, and it neglects the interests of others, seniors, folks who don't speak English as a first language, folks who are not as proximate to power. So our system, the assessor's office right now is geared toward that appeals process, which only increases the inequality, and it leads to people being displaced. We can focus more of the resources, if we're getting things right the first time, from the appeals process to making people aware of the exemptions that they're entitled to. There are very important exemptions out there that help people that are affected by gentrification. If you're a long-term resident, you're entitled to special exemptions. You're also, if you're a senior who's been there if you're a senior, you're entitled to a freeze on your assessment. That's the most valuable benefit that's available in the exemption system. But a lot of people don't even apply for it because they don't know about it. We find that the assessor's office is spending all its time on workshops promoting appeals when they could be promoting the availability and awareness of these exemptions. So that's something that the assessor's office can do. In terms of what are other remedies that we could have, I think it's outrageous that seniors have to apply for their exemptions every year. So, when you become 65, you qualify for these exemptions, but then next year when you turn 66, you have to reapply and say, by the way, I'm 66 now, I was 65. We've got all the data there to do this right. That will also help help seniors survive the process that comes from gentrification in neighborhoods. Also, I think we need to find remedies for owners of multi-unit properties, because the people who are most vulnerable to displacement are renters. Mm-hmm. We have lots of benefits out there for property owners, not much for renters. Renters are the most vulnerable to being displaced, and we need to find legislative remedies and incentives for owners of multi-unit properties to get their assessment frozen or reduced if they commit to long-term tenants and stability in rents.
Now, what we've seen, especially when Heartland's Media is on location to like working class neighborhoods here in Chicago or in Cook County as a whole, we've seen like large schools being shut down because Mayor Emanuel has in the past shut down 50 schools, and now there's talk about him shutting down an additional 30-plus schools in regards to fixing our budget. And it's in regards to him basically displacing the TIF funds from these local communities, and he's using those same funds to make the downtown Loop area and some more affluent areas of Cook County, better and more open and an exciting location for tourists to go to. But my question is this: when you shut down a school in these low-income minority communities, these working-class communities, what is the financial impact for the homeowners, the renters, the local businesses, and really, how does the Cook County assessor really deal with something like that, especially when a school is like shut down?
Well, there are many things that are contributing to displacement and depopulation in neighborhoods. Overassessment is an important piece of that because it causes people to lose their homes because they're paying more than they ought to. That causes their homes to go into foreclosure and get displaced. Same with businesses. When they're overassessed, businesses disinvest, and then those spaces go vacant. and then no business moves in there because they can't hit the numbers because also the taxes are way higher than they ought to be. And then that hurts the surrounding businesses that are open, that are still open. And when you have closures of schools, that's the same kind of dynamic as you have with businesses that are disinvesting. And these neighborhood schools, they're also being disinvested in, and it's heartbreaking. I am a proud graduate of Kenwood Academy in the Chicago Public Schools, which had a very important neighborhood school component to it. It helped me turn around as a student. I was very grateful for it. I'm a big believer in it. We need to be investing in these schools because they are community resources. Talk to the parents who send their kids to these schools. They don't want them closed. People are really passionate about this, and they deserve to be listened to. And what we find today is that we find that there's people who are saying that we know better than you do, the parents of your children, what we should be doing with these schools and what's a good school, and that needs to change. So there are many things that cause depopulation, disinvestment in neighborhoods. The assessment process is an important piece of that we can solve through a change of leadership in this office without needing any new laws. Unfortunately, to address some of the other things, we do need bigger changes that are harder to achieve.
Right. So let's actually focus now on your opponent for this race. Some time ago, Harlan's Media did a live stream at the Chicago Teachers Union Center, and it was regards to the increase in rent and home prices here in Cook County. And the groups that were there were Our Revolution Illinois, Blacks in Green, Pilsen Alliance, the Resurrection Project, Northwest Side Housing Center, and all of them were basically talking about the Berrios tax plan and the impact that it will do for working class families. So what is the impact of his tax plan, and what does your tax plan look in comparison towards his?
Well, the Berrios tax is a shorthand way of talking about overassessment. Mm-hmm. Unnecessary, unwarranted, biased, racially biased overassessment of neighborhoods. And how does this arise? We don't know how it's arising because there's no transparency in terms of how they're coming up with people's assessments. What we do know is that the more modest your home in any neighborhood, the higher the rate you pay. The more your neighborhood was impacted by the housing crisis, you're the most overassessed. And we also know the assessor's gone on the record about this. They're not transparent about what they're doing, but they will say that we don't take into account short sales and foreclosure sales largely in our assessment work. And that's outrageous because in some zip codes, most of the homes with mortgages are underwater, and if you sell them, that is a short sale. And so if they're ignoring those factors, they are getting it wrong. That is a really important reason why they're getting it wrong, and that's what Our Revolution Illinois means when they're talking about the Berrios tax. My plan is to implement the model that the office owns that will generate more uniform rates regardless of income, value of your home, what neighborhood you live in, because that's supposed to be the way the law works. Property tax is regressive enough as it is as a way to finance our government, but please don't make it worse by overassessing the folks of most modest means, especially in a racially disparate way. That's outrageous. That is the Berrios tax that they were talking about. The other part of our plan that will change it, besides having a model that embraces the effect of foreclosures and short sales and generates more uniform rates and eliminates the regressivity, is also being transparent, because then whatever we're doing in the office, we are accountable for it. People can see our work. Third parties, people like the Civic Federation, Brookings, other institutions that have commented on this office and shown how outrageously bad it's doing its job, they can hold us accountable, because if we're being more forthright and transparent in terms of what we're doing with our data, how the algorithms work, that's going to help us go a long way towards getting it right for the people who don't appeal, because that's the way we fix this system. It's not through more appeals. It's getting it right for the people who don't appeal.
Now, the one thing that people talk about Cook County is that it's the most heavily taxed county in the state of Illinois. And there was a soda tax that was passed some time ago and then repealed. And its main job was to basically collect and get more revenue into the county. And now that it's gone, there's talk about city employees being cut from their jobs. So what is your revenue plan to basically help out Cook County?
Well, the bigger picture here, and I wrote about this in Crane's Chicago Business in an op-ed even before I started running, is that in this state we are too dependent on property taxes to finance different levels of government activity, and that is in and of itself very regressive. So the needs of most property taxes are for education. If you look at the needs of a child to be educated, the cost to educate a child tends to grow a little bit in the poorer community that you get. But what we see, if you're financing your education system through property taxes, it goes linearly with the income and the prosperity of the neighborhood. So it's very regressive. We need to be financing more of our education through progressive income taxes. To do that in this state, we need Springfield to get moving on this. So this is what I tell people when they ask me about the governor's race. We need to find a gubernatorial candidate that has committed and made it a priority to get progressive income taxation in this state, so we don't depend as much on property taxes or these other taxes, which are also regressive, like the pop tax, to finance government. And the way we do this, and other states have shown the way. If we look at California, they used to be in the same fiscal crisis and despair that we're in now. They were in that 10 years ago. They don't have that anymore. Why don't they have it? Governor Jerry Brown pushed through progressive income taxation. They still have a wonderfully entrepreneurial economy out there, great quality of life. They have achieved fiscal stability in California. That is the path forward here in Illinois. And we need to find, we need people, and I don't know which governor candidate, will do this, but we need to find that candidate who will make it a priority to make it happen. It's extremely important for huge swaths of the county to get out of this negative cycle. Improving our assessment process in the Southland will provide a measure of justice, more fairness to them, but to really solve the problems that we have in communities where housing prices have fallen by half in some cases, where property taxes are excruciatingly high, we need more progressive income taxation. And I'd just like to comment on one more thing. The tax bill, which just passed in the Senate, is like a bullet aimed at the heart of our communities here, because it's only going to increase the burden much more. The property taxes that we pay are going to be going up to 40% on an after-tax basis after this bill is passed, because they're no longer tax deductible. So if you're in the 40% tax bracket, after tax, your property taxes are now going to be 40% higher. That is going to have disastrous implications on housing prices, on how we finance things like education. I live in Oak Park. We passed a resolution a couple of years ago where the question was, are we willing to increase our property taxes so that we can educate our children in Spanish starting in kindergarten? And we voted yes. With this tax bill in place, that's not going to happen. People are not going to agree to these things, and it's going to cause disinvestment in our children and in our communities. It's an outrage. People need to concentrate their fury on this issue in November, and they need to concentrate their fury not only in voting for Democrats here in Illinois in November, but they also need to do it by getting mobilized in the 6th congressional district where Peter Roskam is. He's outrageously hurting his constituents. He still voted for this. We find Republicans in blue states like Pennsylvania, California, New York that have voted against their constituents' interests, so just so that we could enable estate taxes to be eliminated and corporate taxes to be reduced. That's what's happening here. We're causing disinvestment in our communities, hurting ourselves so we can fund that. People need to be super mobilized on this, because it will have disastrous implications that we're only beginning to understand when they've just rammed this through.
But we've heard from Republicans that the top 1,000 people are the most vulnerable and need the most investment.
They need help.
They need help.
Yes, I think we heard Ken Griffin, who's Governor Rauner's number 2 funder, saying that hedge fund managers don't have enough power. I mean, it's insane. It's hard to believe that we've gotten to where we are. People need to be mobilized, fired up, calling their congressmen. We have a great congressional delegation here on the Democratic side, in the Chicago area that's spoken up about this. But folks in the Republicans in this state who voted for this, they need to be held accountable. Same thing with Republicans in blue states that need to be held accountable. There's a sliver of chance to stop this bill from passing in the House. People need to be super fired up to stop them from voting for it. And if they do vote for it, concentrate their fury in November.
Right. So speaking of which, where can our listeners and our live stream audience learn more about your campaign? Where can they find you on social media?
Sure. You can go to our website at fritzforassessor.com. We've been doing interviews on shows like yours, so I'm really glad that you have us here. We have recordings of many interviews that we've done that people can access on our website. They can access our Facebook page by looking for Fritz Kaegi for Cook County Assessor. We have lots of information, lots of events that we promote there. You can look those up there. And then look out for us in the media. We're out in your community. Give us a call. And we are going to have more and more events as more endorsers are coming out to tell us about this issue. You can also read in the media, in the Chicago Tribune and other media sources about these issues. The Tribune series last summer was really great. It's the most extensive work ever done on this topic in this area.
Well, thank you so much for joining Hard Lens Media. We're definitely going to follow through with this story. I want to thank all our listeners and our live stream audience for tuning in with us today. If you like Hard Lens Media, if you like our content, check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. We also have a mini-series on Can TV every Saturday at 7 p.m., Channel 21. Your support, your contribution, you sharing our content, you guys are our main heart and backbone to Hard Lens Media. So let's all do what we can to build a better future, and tune in with us again on Q4 Radio every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Peace, everyone.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
You're watching Hard Lens Media.